And this is Professor Vid, and I had promised a short video to all of you so that we could talk about the paper assignment. And so lo and behold, here we go. This is the paper assignment video. So a couple of things first. The length for this paper is about 3 to 5 pages. For some people this will be longer, for some people this will be shorter. The length of the paper is not as important as the content. So it's more important what you write than how long you write for. Some students will complete this in 3 pages, some will take more than 5. This is to give you an idea. I don't want a 20-page paper. I don't want a 2 or 1-page paper. Okay, format. The only requirement here is that your font is in 12 point and you more or less conform to MLA. Now, I only mention this because some people really feel the need to adopt some form of format. As long as your paper is in 12-point font and you double space your lines, you should be fine. Due date. The paper is due on the 21st of October. You will turn it in on Canvas electronically to me. Okay, so how much is it worth? 20% of your final grade. So, what's the paper about? Well, I have a little blurb here from Plutarch. Plutarch was a priest at the Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece. And so this story comes down to us from him. Plato mentions it, and even Thomas Hobbes talks about it later in the modern era. The story is, the ship wherein Theseus, who was a Greek hero for the city of Athens, and the youth of Athens returned from Crete, had 30 oars, and was preserved by the Athenians down even to the time of Demetrius Phalereus, for they took away the old planks as they decayed, putting in new and stronger timber in their places, insomuch that this ship became a standing example among the philosophers for the logical questions of things that grow, one side holding that the ship remained the same, and the other contending that it was not the same. So here's the general idea. We have a ship, and over time we gradually replace each piece of the ship with a new piece. Eventually, all of the pieces will change. Is it still the same ship? Plato mentions this in the Cratylus, and he's discussing Heraclitus. That might ring a bell to you. Heraclitus is very interested in change. Heraclitus, you know, says that everything moves and that nothing is at rest. And comparing existing things to the flow of a river, he says that you could not step in the same river twice. So if you think about the ship and you think about a river where the water is always flowing onward, there's an analogy there. There's a parallel there. And the idea is that the particles within the river change. The physical symbols that make up the river change over time. It doesn't happen all at once, but over time it does change. Now, we don't go around renaming rivers. We don't say, oh my gosh, yesterday this was the Colorado River, but all the water in it today is different, so we're going to have to rename it. Instead, we keep the same name for each river over time. Why do we do that if we think that the river is changing and it's not the same river twice? So, the idea behind this paper is that you will apply these principles, these themes, these considerations to your own personal identity. In other words, you change over time because the parts that make you up change over time. If you also consider the experiences that you have over time, those tend to shape who you are and affect your decisions. And so the person that I am now is not the same person that I was 10 years ago. That's because, number one, much of my physical makeup is different. The particles that make up my hands here are not the particles that made up my hands 10 years ago. Also, the things I have encountered and experienced have changed my perspective and the way that I view the world even to some extent, my values change. So, you will be applying that, and the question is, am I still Professor Vitt? Well, it seems like it. So, here's the format that I encourage you to use in this paper. First off, your very first paragraph, explain the ship of Theseus to me. First, you will explain the ship of Theseus to me in your own words. Sometimes students overlook the importance of this section. It's important that you explain to me what the story is, because the story will then become the basis for your conceptual analysis in the next part of the paper. So, talk to me about Plutarch's story and do so in your own words. The next thing that you'll do, and this is the meat of the paper, this is the sandwich of the paper, you're going to be applying different principles to explain whether or not the ship stays the same, and you will also apply those principles to a person and whether or not they make sense when applied to a person. So, for instance, first you will discuss history. When you discuss the principle of a history of a thing, making it itself, you would do something like this. Suppose in the ship of Theseus, we have a ship that is originally made of wood, and then it is made of steel. Well, we replace each bit with metal or steel. So, we have two histories here. The history of the wooden parts and the history of the metal parts. Therefore, we have two histories. Therefore, we have two ships. Now, that's the basic analysis. However, you can dig a little deeper here. You don't have to, and if this doesn't make sense, please don't worry about it. But if you think about it, there are actually a lot of histories here. If the ship is made of 500 pieces, then every time you replace a piece, each piece has its own history, so you would have had about 500 some odd ships, because each piece makes a new history, which makes a new ship. Seems a little strange, probably not correct, but you could argue for it. Now, when discussing a person, think about it in terms of your meals. When you eat an egg, by the end of the day, the egg becomes you. Are you a totally different person because you eat an egg? Probably not. Next up, you will discuss the blueprint. Okay. The blueprint is the plan used to construct the ship. And so if you are discussing what makes a ship the same, it's the specifications according to which it was made. So because there's one blueprint for the ship of Theseus, there would then be one ship. Even though you might have a ship made out of wood and metal, it is the same ship. One of them made out of wood, one of them made out of metal. Consider applying this to people. The obvious parallel here is someone who has an identical twin. An identical twin has the same blueprint as his or her or their twin. That is, they share the same DNA sequence. In that case, you might well argue that this is just one person, but two versions of them. Next, the physical parts that make up the person, or the ship. In this case, the ship is itself because of the parts that it's made out of. So, again, you would have a lot of different ships here. Every time I moved a part out, I would have a new ship. Does this make sense when we apply it to people? Are you a different person because you have an egg in the morning? What happens? Your body takes that egg, converts it to protein, and floods it through your body, putting it where it needs to go, getting rid of the old proteins that have been degraded or whatever. Well, it seems strange to say that you're a totally different person because you've eaten an egg, but you are made of different parts. You'll notice that to some degree, A and C overlap. That's fine. Next up, memory and soul. these will only apply to the person. The ship will not have a memory. The ship will not have a soul. So in these two paragraphs, you will only be discussing the criteria as it applies to a person. So you might say that what makes a person is the memories that they have. This does make sense because sometimes events shape the way that we see the world in very fundamental ways. So, consider cases in your analysis which involve the loss of memory or the forgetfulness of memories or false memories. Someone might feel that they're a different person after they have unearthed memories of being abducted by aliens. This would be a very traumatic experience for someone, and they might feel that the world changes completely afterwards. You may feel that that's not correct. It's still the same person. They've just learned something new, even if it turns out that thing that they've learned is false or incorrect. Next up, a soul. One thing that might make sense to you, and it might not, is that people often feel it's a common view to hold a sort of dualism. The idea is that you are not just made out of matter, but you are something extra. You are a spiritual substance as opposed to the non-spiritual substance that we have that we interact with every day. In that case, it doesn't matter what happens to your physical parts, because there is something underlying all of it that either retains your memories or is in some way fundamentally you. This could be in a variety of different worldviews, but very frequently people feel this way with regard to a Western conception of a divinity, where one has a soul, and that soul is what will perpetuate in an afterlife. Okay, so that's what you'll be doing very roughly. Last, I would love to hear your own thoughts. Perhaps you feel that there really isn't anything such as personal identity, that people simply aren't the same over time. You may feel that personal identity is fundamentally social, and so your analysis of memory may reflect that. If you talk to people who know someone from long ago, different groups of people may remember that person very differently. In that case, the identity of that person really does reside in two different groups of people. You may feel that you want to discuss the soul a bit more. Maybe you find the soul a very convincing model. Maybe you don't. It's up to you. Now, I'm not grading you on what you think in this section. I'm just grading that you think. So it's important to me that you come up with some reflection. It does not need to be original, but it should be something that occurred to you while you were writing A through E. Again, the total length of this paper is 3 to 5 pages. If you're a little under or a little over, it's fine. I don't want you to have to change the margins or the size of the words to try and meet the page length. Okay. Here is your grading rubric. This is how you will earn your A. Organization, mechanics, style, and substance. Organization. Did you follow this particular format? If you did not follow this format, do you feel that, did you still organize it well? There's nothing that says you have to follow this format. If you prefer another way, that's fine, but make sure that it's organized so that your reader can follow along. Mechanics. This is the nuts and bolts of writing. How is your grammar, punctuation marks, verb and pronoun agreement, etc. Style. How was the paper written? Were you focused? Did you address things properly? This is sort of how you write. Next, substance. Did you explain the paper enough? Did you talk about the concepts enough with sufficient depth and breadth to really get through? Now, this is a 3 to 5 page paper, so I'm not expecting anything super technical, but you will need to hit those major points. Please remember, all papers can be rewritten, so if it doesn't quite work out the first time, you are always welcome to resubmit. Okay, I hope that's helpful. I look forward to reading your submissions, and if I messed anything up, please let me know.